Well, good morning, TOC. Look at this. I get to share some announcements. I don't know. This is a different format. I'm in this frame instead of that frame. So, first quick announcement to share is we have Men Fire Jesus coming up this Wednesday. This Wednesday, Men Fire Jesus. It is going to be potentially in person. We are playing it literally by ear, day by day, as the counties change and make different decisions on gatherings. So hopefully we can gather in person and it will look like this, or we will be gathering on a Zoom and it will look more like this. But either way, we can look like this together. I don't know. Let's toss it over to Christine. She's got some updates for what's going on with the kids this morning.
Hey Argon community, Christine here. Wanted to give you a little update on kids community looking forward for the next 4 weeks. I'm going to be posting a 4-week series on a topic that we've obviously been really confronted with the last few weeks, which is racism. And I know it's a powerful and complex issue, and I know it can be really challenging to explain to kids, but it's something that I feel like it's really important right now to be talking about with our kids. So for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to post 4 lessons, and they're going to correspond with the book, The Gospel in Color. And there's a kid version called The Gospel in Color for Kids, and there's a parent version called The Gospel in Color for Parents. And these books are designed to equip parents and kids have helpful and honest conversations on the topic of race. So I'm going to also post some discussion questions after the lesson on our website, so families can use those to talk to their kids. But that's what you'll see for the next 4 weeks from kids community. I think this is a super important topic, and it's something that we should be really talking about with our kids. So hope you enjoy it, and I hope it provides some good discussion and opportunities to talk with your kids about this issue. Look forward to hearing about what you guys think.
Thank you, Christine. Another announcement that we have our men's camping trip coming up in August. We have the dates secured, the sites secured. Now we just need it to be secure by August so we can go. So that's coming up. Let us know. Email me, email Kyle. Let us know if you need a spot. We're going to have limited spaces available. And so we want to make sure we get everybody that wants to come. We get a place for you. And then now we're gonna toss it over to the stick rods. Nate and Christy, what are you doing?
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, guys.
This week we have another Bible project video for you. This one is on the law. Seems like kind of an odd topic for right now, but I think it's really interesting to look and see the purpose of the law. How God designed it so that we can love Him well and love others, and how Jesus enables us to do that.
Yeah, we hope you all are doing all right. We love you all. Hope you enjoy the video and learn something new this week.
Bye.
All right, and then lastly, we have our giving available online. Thank you so much for continuing to support our church through this time. It's feels like it's been longer than we expected, maybe, and it's been scary, and yet together we're getting through this, and so I want to thank you for your support and all of that. Lastly, I just want to say that this week I have been committing, and I'd like us all to be committing to a few things. One is prayer. Prayer for prayers of repentance, asking forgiveness. Personally, for my part in systemic racism and all of the privileges and the reality that I am kind of waking up to in some of that. So I'm asking that we pray this week. And second, that we educate ourselves There are so many great books, resources, podcasts available right now that are really opening my eyes and helping me to once again learn more and understand more of what white privilege is all about, what we're protesting, why we're marching, why it matters, that I am involved. I know that sounds terrible, but I'm trying to educate myself in what my place is in this, and I would like for all of us to be doing that. And then third, activism, some sort of action. And it's going to look different for each of us. Whatever it is, we need to be praying, we need to be educating ourselves, and we need to take steps, make specific actions to see what I am starting to see, I'm hopeful to see, is some of the change that we're longing for in this country and in this world. So thank you guys, love you guys. Let's worship together this morning.
Good morning, Oregon community. This morning I was thinking about something I heard a guitar player I admire a long time ago. He was holding this guitar, and I thought it was a beautiful guitar, and I kind of coveted it. And then he talked about how it fit him perfectly, how it was a great guitar. But if he doesn't set it down, it will cause harm to his body. His back will begin to ache, his muscles will hurt, his wrists will cramp up, his fingers will begin to hurt. And it was a great reminder of how every once in a while, daily, we need to lay down the things that we identify as good. We need to lay things down and just be for a moment. And I'm hoping this time can be that for us. To lay things down that are good. They're good things that give to us. But to lay them down so that we can be just us without something contributing, without something telling us what to do next, or whatever it is, that we can just submit ourselves to silence, and hopefully out of that silence, Christ. Jesus, thank you that we have a still voice, a whisper, that if we are tuned to it, if we're quiet, if we quiet our minds, it doesn't matter what our voices are doing. If we quiet our minds and listen to you, your love emerges, and there's so much to hear. While we're playing music, while we're sitting in our homes, wherever we are and this is happening, help us to lay down whatever it is that's weighing on our minds, just for a little bit. We'll pick it back up later on. But we're worth setting those things down, and you're worth setting those things down for. In your name, Christ, amen.
To hunger
fresh on me. Come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pouring me to overflow. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, come fall afresh on me. Come wake me from my sleep. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pouring me to overflow. To overflow. To overflow. To overflow. Sing, awaken my soul, awaken my soul, come awake, awaken my soul, awaken my soul, come awake. Sing that again. Awaken my soul, come awake. Sing to worship with all your strength, to worship with all your strength. Lord, there are so many times where we know how to worship you in our weakness, when we need you. You give us this wonderful way of phrasing it, to love God with all of our heart, souls, minds, and strength. Teach us how to love you with our strength. You've shown us what strength looks like, and it looks way more like sacrifice than it does anything else. Make us strong, and let us be strong in your image, not our own or anyone else's. When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss your name. Christ, in this moment, at these times, wherever that is, it seems like it changes daily. There's such a comfort in knowing that one thing is consistent, and it's that your love is the purpose. Your love is the goal. Your love is the aim, the trajectory, and the motivation. We don't just run to your love, but we run with it. And the best way to do that is together. If we had all of nature to offer and it was all mine to give, it wouldn't be a good offering because it would be just me giving it. And that's not what you asked for, and it's not what you need. You need us giving, loving, caring, and hoping together. We'll take a moment of silence for the prayers of the people. And this is a chance for us to think of others. Think of whoever comes to mind and offer prayer. Offer love. Offer ideas of how to help, how to be a part of it. And if there are people who are experiencing good things right now, thinking of how can we encourage them in those good things too? How can we care for those who are in the middle of this? And if we've had kids, there's so much that's happened over these few months. But to just take time and think of others. We'll take a moment of silence now.
Good morning, everybody. It's been a little while since I've had the opportunity to share with you like this. In fact, it has been, since February. And there's a lot that has happened since February. Just a few things. Before we get going, if I could just take a minute to pray. Heavenly Father, we are grateful that we could have the opportunity this morning, today, whenever we get the opportunity to watch this video, but that we even have the ability to communicate this way, that we can still be in each other's living rooms, even though we can't physically be in each other's living rooms yet here in Portland. And so, Lord, we're grateful for your faithfulness, and just thank you for your love in your name. So since I had the opportunity to talk to everybody, other than announcements, there's been a few things that have happened. COVID-19, 2020, we were not expecting, I wasn't expecting COVID-19. And then also the death of George Floyd and what has been happening since that. It's kind of interesting. I look back at the last 3 months and it's like 2020, this year, we didn't start with COVID-19. We didn't start with the unrest that's happening right now. Some of us had just been getting comfortable. Maybe we were transitioning into a new job. Even once the quarantine started, I saw the post from a lot of people that were saying, man, this is my wheelhouse. This is my jam, that I just get to stay at home and I don't have to talk to people. And for a lot of us, we were just getting comfortable. And for others, though, that wasn't necessarily the case. But what's interesting is 2020, COVID-19 actually didn't start in 2020. It started at the end of 2019. And in reality, the unrest, the pain, the racism that we see following not only the death of George Floyd, but then following his death, that didn't start this year either. Sickness didn't start this year. Racism didn't start this year. These are things that have been going on for a long time. Every century or so, maybe there's a pandemic at least. Racism has not just been something that's happened in this decade or in this century. And so looking back at this time and the things that we kind of think of as really defining this year so far. They're not even new things. The reality is that a lot of us were just getting comfortable. So this is the second sermon in our series called Being. And to title this one, Being Disrupting Comfort. Because the reality is that we've become comfortable while others have become uncomfortable. That we have become comfortable while others have become uncomfortable. And, maybe for you in all of this, in whether it's the pandemic or what's been going on with racism and riots and protests and demonstrations, maybe for you, you weren't becoming comfortable. So let me just rephrase this for myself. I was becoming comfortable. That I have become comfortable while others have become uncomfortable. That I was getting comfortable. And the reality for me too is that during this time, during this quarantine, we've been busy with work for counseling. Maybe the busiest that I've ever been. And I don't know that that's comfortable, but not a lot changed in my personal world during that time, other than I don't get to see my friends and don't get to go to church or hang out at the Oregon Public House or things like that. But for in a lot of ways, I had become comfortable while others had become uncomfortable. And so even to ask this question, like, should I feel bad for becoming comfortable? Should you feel bad for becoming comfortable? No, I don't think so. In fact, we're sold comfort. When we watch TV, when you watch the news, other than the news, when you watch TV and you see commercials, everything that we are sold or advertised to us is about our comfort. Buy this, it'll make your life better. Go here, it'll make your life better. Eat this, you'll look better, feel better. It's about comfort. And so we're all seeking comfort. But the reality is that some of us are keeping that to ourselves while others are suffering. And I think we ignore the discomfort because we start to create a life, we create an atmosphere where things start to feel better to us. And so it's easy to ignore the discomfort that other people are feeling. It's easy to numb ourselves out to the discomfort that maybe is going on next door to us, or maybe even in the heart of our spouse or of our children. As we are pursuing our own, it's easy for us to miss what's going on in the lives of the people around us. And even I've said this before as a joke to people, like, oh man, I need to mow my yard, or I need to do something at my house, or my kid is having a really rough time right now. And as a joke, I've said, well, you know what? It looks great from my house. From here, it looks great. And it is, it's a joke, but it's kind of the way we operate. To say that if it's not affecting me, well, you know what? Even just the other day I said, not my kid, not my problem. I was joking, but was I? Not necessarily. There's a quote from C.S. Lewis that says that pain is God's megaphone to a deaf world. And we come back to this quote a lot in the work that we do. And it's not to say that God wants you to experience pain and that he's trying to teach you a lesson through pain. But I think it's to say that pain and discomfort is woven into creation to let us know that something's wrong. And when we are so actively pursuing comfort, to not feel these other things, to not feel the discomfort, we're missing the message that maybe is there for us to say that something's broken, something's wrong. That's what happens with sickness. If we get a headache and we just keep popping ibuprofen, sure, the headache goes away, but why are we getting headaches? We're just numbing ourselves to the pain that's there. And so this idea that pain is God's megaphone to a deaf world, that there's pain there, there's discomfort there, and we're made to respond to it. But if we're not responding to it, if we're ignoring it, if we aren't present, then we're not really being at this moment. The idea of being versus doing, that doing is about tasks and about performance, and that being is about being present in relationship and about being present in emotions and feeling our own emotions. So this idea has really been, I guess, bothering me, that while I've been getting comfortable, others have been uncomfortable. And so I want to look at a few passages this morning that just help us to see this juxtaposition between one person in their comfort and another in their discomfort. So we're going to run quickly through a few different passages. The first one that I wanted to look at is the lost son. You may know the story as the prodigal son. And so in this story, there's a son, and he goes to his father. He says, "I want my inheritance now." And the father gives him his inheritance, and the son goes away. You can find this passage in Luke 15:11 through 32. And the son goes away, and he squanders his wealth, and he realizes what a mistake he's made. And while he is living in this discomfort of not only his shame of his choice, but realizing that these pigs are eating better than I am. The brother back home is living in comfort. And what we see then is that when the lost son actually comes home, and the father receives him and throws this party and is just rejoicing that he's home, the brother is upset. He's been comfortable while the other son was uncomfortable. Another example of this is the story of the 10 Samaritan lepers, that they're outside of this village and Jesus is on his journey and he sees them, or they see him from far off, and the lepers say, "Lord, have mercy on us." And what's interesting about this is, not only are these guys Samaritans, so they're outcasts to the Jews, but they're lepers, so they're not even allowed in the Samaritan village. And while these Samaritan lepers are uncomfortable, the priests that declared them unclean and the town, they're comfortable. Because these guys are out of town. They're on the outside of the village. Everybody else is at home. They've got their comfort. They don't have to see the sickness and the disgustingness that comes along with being a leper. Another story where we see this is in the book of Jonah. Jonah is called to go to Nineveh. He doesn't want to do it because he knows that God is predisposed to mercy. And so instead he runs away. But when he ends up in Nineveh, he tells the Ninevites, "You know what, you guys are going to get wiped out." And he goes up on a hill and reclines and sits back, and there's even a vine that grows over him and there's shade, and he's up there in his comfort watching the people in Nineveh be terrified. It says that they dressed in sackcloth, covered themselves in ashes, and that they were just terrified and weeping and crying out at the impending doom that they were going to have, and Jonah was in his comfort. Another story is the woman caught in adultery. And so here's this woman. It says in this passage in John 8 that she was literally caught in the act. Like they walked in while she was having sex, caught in the act. They bring her to Jesus. "Jesus, what should we do?" The law says that we should stone her. This woman, in her shame, in her discomfort, is before Jesus and before the crowd. And she's uncomfortable. And these leaders and the town, they're sitting back in their comfort. They're finding a good place where they can get a rock and have a good shot at her. A place where they can stand to have a good view. Because why would you go to a stoning if you don't have a good view? They're getting comfortable while she is getting uncomfortable. There's a story of the possessed man in the cemetery, and he's there, and they've tried to shackle him and chain him, and he's cutting himself with rocks. The pain, the loneliness, the discomfort that he's feeling, while the priests and the town are way off over there. They don't have to see it. They don't have to hear it. They're living in their comfort while he is in his discomfort. Now, if we continue to walk through these, go back to these stories a little bit, I want to point out something else with them. That while, let's just say, the lost son, right, he's in his discomfort. And why? Well, culture would say that he's in his discomfort in this parable because he's a narcissist. He just cares about himself. Give me what's mine so that I can go and do what I want with my money, with my inheritance. I'd rather have this now than be here with you, Dad, while you're alive. Give me my inheritance now. I'm going to take it. He's a narcissist. And guess what? He made some bad choices too. I mean, he made some bad choices. He squandered his wealth. Squandered it on harlots is what his brother says. In his sin, he made some bad choices. With the 10 lepers, culture would say that because they're Samaritans, religiously, almost like a cult, they do things different than us Jews. They're different than we are. And not only that, but they have this kind of race that's different, this religion that's different. And on top of that, they're lepers, which means that they would be seen as sinners. And that's part of why they got leprosy, because this is the punishment or the consequence for sin in their life. We see Nineveh, and the Ninevites were known to be predisposed to violence, that they would do horrible things to the Jews, horrible things. Read different things, but things like dipping them in tar and using them as candles for their backyard parties type of idea. Predisposed to violence. Their nationality was wrong. They were clearly living in sin. The woman caught in adultery, as far as their perspective goes, she was a whore. She was caught in the act. And so the sin that was in her life and her gender at that time would have culturally made her less important. The possessed man living in the cemetery, violent. They shackled and chained him and he broke them, cutting himself. But these would have been this possession would have been the result. Culturally, the perspective of his choices and of his sin. For all of these people, it's the idea that culture says they're getting what they deserve. And right now, culture is telling us that the blacks in our country versus the whites, the blacks are becoming uncomfortable. They've always been uncomfortable. While the whites, and I know these are broad brushstrokes, folks, but this is the cultural perspective that's being set for us, and we need to understand what's happening, that the blacks have been uncomfortable while the whites have been comfortable. But culture would also say, well, you know what though? They're predisposed to violence. They're violent. They live lives of crime. They're reckless. They're lazy. Culture would say that because of their race, that because of their choices, that because of their sin, they're getting what they deserve. There's a lot of evangelical culture that's saying these messages right now. And if you don't think so, listen to the language that we use, that we hear others using. Well, then why don't they just get a better job? Why don't they move out of that neighborhood? Why don't they make better choices so they're not living a life of crime? And instead, what they're doing is they're pursuing these things. Why don't they do something else? They're getting what they deserve. And I think this perspective then, they're getting what they deserve, leads us to a place of apathy. And in our apathy, we do nothing. In our apathy, we're comfortable because we can simply be spectators on what's happening in the lives of the people around us. I usually avoid posting conversation, not conversation, well, basically, yeah. I avoid posting controversial things on social media because I don't want to invite the conversation that comes with it. On social media, people will say things that they won't say to your face. It's kind of like road rage. We will yell things from our car to somebody else in a car that we would never say to their face. I heard somebody once yell to another person, "I'll eat your kids." Imagine being in an elevator and someone bumps into you or steps in front of you, and to say to their face, "I'll eat your kids." We say things that are crazy. On social media. And so I don't like to post things because I don't like to invite the conversation that comes with it. But the other day I reposted something on Instagram, and it was from a black woman who had posted the idea that we should treat racism like we treat COVID-19, that we should just assume that we have it. And someone that I grew up with replied to me in a private message, and he said, "I agree," and he went on to talk about it. And after reading what he wrote, I realized he didn't actually agree. He misunderstood what I was saying and what the post was saying. He actually 100% the opposite of agreed with what I was trying to say. And we got into this conversation about empathy and about showing love and demonstrating empathy and love to those that are hurting. And this is what he said. He said, as a question, should empathy should be based off of the reality of the gospel or an emotional response to a perceived injustice? Let me say that again. He asked the question if whether or not empathy should be based off of the reality of the gospel or an emotional response to a perceived injustice. And the language was so loaded. An emotional response to a perceived injustice. Why should we show empathy? And in thinking about that, I mean, empathy is just a response to pain and fear. It doesn't matter whether it's perceived or real, because there's no difference. If someone is afraid, if someone is hurt, then that is the opportunity to show empathy. And it really got me processing the other part of like the reality of the gospel. So I thought, man, what does the gospel say about showing empathy? And to whom should we show empathy? In what scenario should we show empathy? And I thought about those passages that we already walked through. But I also went back to some ideas that I shared in a message maybe a year ago. And it was comparing these ideas that apathy is the idea of basically doing nothing. That when we see something going on, and maybe it's because the cultural lie tells us that they're getting what they deserve, or maybe it's because of our comfort, but whatever it is, that apathy says, I'm going to do nothing. Sympathy says, I feel bad for that person. I pity them. I pity what's going on. I feel bad for them. Oh, those poor blacks. Look at what they're going through. Empathy is to go and experience the pain alongside of them. People say things like put yourself in their shoes, but really it's to be there and to feel the pain with them. But empathy, if that's where we stop, falls short. Empathy should always lead us to compassion. And so I want to walk back through those stories real quick, just to say, like, what would they look like if Jesus only did apathy or some of these other things? So the lost son. The lost son returns home, and this isn't Jesus, this is a parable, this is a father. But what if when the son returned home, the father was apathetic and just did nothing? Well, no, that's not what he did. He wasn't even sympathetic. He wasn't even empathetic. He was compassionate, and he did something, and he received his son home. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say, where have you been? Why did you do that? I hope you feel bad. I hope you're ashamed of yourself. All he did was receive him with joy. In fact, those other two parables of the lost things, the lost coin and the lost sheep, it was the same idea. The lost sheep wandered off because it was dumb, maybe. I don't know. The coin got lost because someone else lost it. But it didn't matter. When the sheep was found, they rejoiced. When the coin was found, they rejoiced. When the lost son returned, they rejoiced. There was compassion. What about the 10 Samaritan lepers? Jesus didn't just walk on by. He didn't say, oh, look at those disgusting lepers. That's gross. He didn't say, oh, man, I feel so bad for you guys. Let me just sit down and cry with you. He did something. In fact, what the lepers said, they said, have mercy on us. Best translation of that is compassionate us. Don't just feel bad for us, but please do something to make this better. In Nineveh, same thing. I mean, God didn't just do nothing when the people were weeping and scared and frightened. He relented. And as he is predisposed to show mercy, you see this in the Old Testament, that he leans towards mercy. He showed compassion on them. The adulteress, the woman caught in adultery. Again, Jesus didn't just do nothing. He didn't just say, oh, wow, icky. You were caught, busted, cheaters. No, what he did was he showed compassion to her. And likewise with the possessed man. In fact, at the end of the story with the possessed man in the cemetery, Jesus says, go and tell the town, tell the people, tell your family, tell your friends about the compassion that I showed you. Because the reality is that Jesus always responds with compassion towards the hurting. Jesus always responds with compassion towards the hurting. Not apathy, not sympathy, not empathy. I mean, again, even empathy, we think, oh man, he'd empathize with them. So what would he do? We'd sit down next to him and hold their hand and cry with them. That would be great. I mean, that would be a step in the right direction. But if it stopped there, when he has the power to compassionate them, then, I mean, what a tragedy that would be. He has the ability to do that, and that he wouldn't? Of course not. Jesus always responds with compassion towards the hurting. Conversely, this is interesting, the main ones that he responds harshly towards are those in positions of authority and privilege. Well, Bob, you're just grabbing the word privilege because it's like a hot word right now. Am I, though? I mean, think about all of the people that were back in their comfort. The son, the other son at home in his comfort. The town, the priests in their comfort. And because of that, they had privileges. They had rights. They could do things that the lepers couldn't do. They could do things that this woman caught in adultery. They felt like they could do things, like they had rights. One, they're men. Two, they didn't get caught in adultery, but actually some guy did. Some other guy, she was having sex with some other guy, got caught in adultery, but he wasn't brought before everybody. Why is that? I wonder. I don't know. Culture would say that he had a privilege over the woman as a man. In all of these scenarios, I want to look at one other quick passage, Luke 13. It says, one Sabbath day, as Jesus was teaching in a synagogue, he saw a woman who had been crippled by an evil spirit. She had been bent double for 18 years and was unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Dear woman, you're healed of your sickness." Then he touched her, and instantly she could stand straight. How she praised God. But the leader, the authority in charge of the synagogue, was indignant that Jesus had healed her on the Sabbath day. There are 6 days of the week for working, he said to the crowd. Come on those days to be healed, not on the Sabbath. The leader, the authority, the one that had been there, he'd seen this woman. I mean, they'd been around. She'd been around for 18 years like that. And what had he done? My guess is not compassionate, not the way Jesus did. And so Jesus' response is, you hypocrites, each of you work on the Sabbath day. Don't you untie your ox or your donkey from its stall on the Sabbath and lead it out for water? This dear woman, a daughter of Abraham, has been held in bondage by Satan for 18 years. Isn't it right that she should be released even on the Sabbath? And this shamed his enemies. And I wonder, why were they his enemies? Enemies how? Enemies of showing love? Enemies of showing compassion? Compassion should always be the response to hurting. When we see someone hurting, it doesn't matter whether we feel like it's their fault that it happened, whether we feel like they were irresponsible or predisposed or because of their race or their gender or whatever. It doesn't matter the reason that they're hurting. The appropriate response 100% of the time is always compassion. And the response to authority and privilege, at least Jesus' response, is almost always disruptive accountability. The first house I ever bought was a condo. It was built in the 70s. And where my garage was, my neighbor's condo was actually above my garage. And I remember going into my garage one day and just water pouring through the ceiling. And was just destroying boxes of things that were so important. Clearly I had them in boxes still. But the point is, this water was pouring through the ceiling and all my stuff was getting damaged and my ceiling was getting damaged. And I went up and I knocked on the door and my neighbor Frank was not home. but I knew where Frank hung out. He hung out at the bar around the corner. So I went up to the bar, and his truck was out front, and I went inside, and Frank was sitting at the bar, and I said, Frank, dude, something's leaking in your apartment, and it's like wrecking my garage. Will you please come back to your house, like, so we can turn the water off and figure this out? And he said, you know what, man, like, I just got here, I'm having a beer, I'm just gonna stay here. I'm like, dude, Frank, like, your apartment, your condo is leaking into mine, and like, not only majorly inconveniencing me, but damaging my property and affecting my life. It's making things very uncomfortable. Will you please come? And he said, no, I won't. In fact, the bartender said, excuse me, sir, will you please stop bothering my customer? So leave unless you're going to buy a beer. I left, and I went back, and I smashed in Frank's front window. And I went into his house, and I turned off his water. All it was a leaky toilet. Just the hose running from the valve up to the tank. That's all it was. Just this tiny little leak, but it was wrecking my garage and my stuff. I thought about this story this last week when I read a quote from Banksy, a famous artist and activist, and he says this. He says, at first I thought I should just shut up and listen to black people about this issue. But why would I do that? It's not their problem, it's mine. People of color are being failed by the system, the white system, like a broken pipe flooding the apartment of the people living downstairs. This faulty system is making their life a misery, but it's not their job to fix it. They can't. No one will let them in the apartment upstairs. This is a white problem, and if white people do not fix it, someone will have to come upstairs and kick the door in. I don't think he's condoning violence. I'm not condoning violence. But just like when Frank wouldn't get his butt off of the bench at the bar to come home and find out what the problem was because he was comfortable, and I broke his window to go find out, we shouldn't be surprised that when others are sitting in comfort, that others aren't going to say, I'm so uncomfortable that I'm going to do whatever it takes to disrupt and find a problem. But we haven't been letting them. They haven't been allowed to speak into a system to solve a problem. And so, in my story about my condo, I was the one that was in discomfort. But I'm not that one right now. I would be the one, the privileged one, that Jesus would be speaking harshly towards. Who would you be in this equation? Are you the one that Jesus is speaking harshly towards? Are you listening? Are you seeing the role that you play? I've fought the idea of white privilege because I've always thought like I'm not doing anything to like be privileged. I've always fought the idea, but it's crap. Jesus would be speaking to me harshly. And I think a lot of you listening and watching this today, that he would be speaking to you harshly. He'd be saying that while you've been comfortable, others have been uncomfortable. And it's not that we need to turn our back on our own comfort, but we should use our own ability and position to fight for the equity of others that have not had that same privilege and that have not had that same ability. Compassion should always be the first response to pain. Doesn't matter where the pain came from, why the pain's there, but it should always be the first response to that. I want to say that Black Lives Matter.
gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance